Right, hello all. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Kind of a fast-paced session today, so I'm going to get straight into it. And those that are not here yet can jump in when they see fit. Really, today's session is plan your way out of uncertainty. And what I'm really talking about here is strategic planning. I want to talk about this whole concept of strategy, how we develop it in periods of uncertainty like we have right now, probably have for some time. I'm also going to discuss how we really tie it back to how we execute, how we go about implementing. And through this, hopefully I can really set you up for to win in 2024. So there are really three elements I want to focus on in this session. First, I just want to give you some practical tools for developing strategy. We'll talk about what strategy is, what are the things we actually think about and make decisions around in terms of strategy. Second, I want to just to satisfy the left-hand side of your brain. I just want to take those tools and actually talk about the process. So a lot of what I do is help businesses through the process of thinking about strategy, deciding on strategy and turning that into actionable, implementable tasks and goals. So what we're focusing on here is objectives and key results and day-to-day activities. And then third, I just want to satisfy really the right-hand side of the brain. I'll just run through some tips and tricks on how to make the process faster and easier. Because we have limited time today and this training is not about me, it's about getting the information you need. I'm not going to go through my background here. However, if you're curious to learn a bit more about me, go to my website and look at the About page. So let's first just start with the biggest challenges that we find in terms of the business growth process. Firstly is around product and customer development. How do I develop the right products? How do I innovate? How do I find customers? How do I attract them? How do I acquire them? How do I get them to use my product and service? So differentiating in a competitive world has never really been so relevant. Another is finding and keeping talent. How do I find the right people? Where do I find them? How do I recruit them? How do I onboard them? How do I retain them? And there's never been, more pertinent in the world. We find ourselves now with kind of record levels of employment. Managing people and performance. How do I set up the people to do the right things, they're doing them efficiently, that they're delivering them correctly, and that we're focused in the right areas, that we're delivering the right results, that we're measuring in the right way. Setting objectives and key results has an important part to play in this. And then finally, around funding and managing cash. We have a phrase that we use, growth sucks cash. We need to make sure we're not going to grow ourselves out of business. More growth companies end up dying from indigestion than starvation, meaning that we can create situations where the cash demands for growth can outstrip our resources, and this can be, get us into a lot of trouble. So we want to make sure that we have the appropriate funding, that we manage our cash flow as we go. So those are the general things we talk about and focus on as business coaches. There's another really important dimension to consider in the business growth process. There are really key points in a company's growth where you're bigger, but you're not quite big enough to have the next level of talent, the next level of systems that you really need to scale up revenue. And these are points where a business's growth can really plateau and needs to leap from the top of one peak to the risk, or really falling into the abyss. And for many, the natural response is to throw money at the problem in the form of aggressive marketing, or to seek a cash injection, or to reinvest in the business. But spending money on marketing or taking on added debt may lead you down the wrong path. So you have to consider what's really causing the plateau in your business growth. And usually it's one of the following 9 reasons, and that really keeps a business from growing. Firstly, an outdated business plan. It takes, years to build a business, and a lot of things change and evolve in a year or two. So it needs constant review. An imperfect pricing strategy. A better strategy than lowering prices is to find ways to add value to what you do. Blending in with the competition. You have to do something that's uniquely valuable. Find a new service that your competitors don't provide. Settling for too comfortable. Lowered lower expectations of performance than really should be. A poor sales conversion, a flaw in the process or the way it's been executed. Investing in tons of expensive technology, functionality that you won't use every day. Look for free or lower cost alternatives. Avoiding tough decisions. Don't expect accelerated growth if you're not willing to make some hard decisions or change direction. And then a flawed focus. Instead of focusing on fewer, bigger clients, that take a lot of energy and resource. Focus on servicing a smaller, steady client base. And then finally, dependence on DIY everything. A reluctance to outsource tasks or hire help. And if you're distracted from selling more and growing your company, you'll just stay stuck. So how do you get to those 2 points successfully? Well, here's a few of the key things. Firstly, we want to make sure that you have clear definition for the next stage. So if you're at 2 million revenue and you're trying to get to 5 million, we want to know in terms of what those numbers are that represent a nice, stable structure inside the company in terms of people, in terms of management, in terms of roles and reporting, in terms of processes. And if we don't have a clear vision, we basically don't know where we're going. We don't know how far we have to go, how quickly we need to get there. Secondly, we want to reduce the time in that unprofitable zone or that inefficient zone. So that's really about how do you accelerate the growth process? And a lot of companies end up taking too long. And if you spend too long in that unprofitable zone, you're going to eat up too much resource. And then we want to make sure you have a sufficient war chest. We want to make sure that we have funds available to get through that. I call it swimming the underwater cavern. Like, I want to get through. I want to make sure I have enough oxygen. If I don't have enough oxygen to get through, I'm going to have to back up, or worse, I'm going to get stuck in the middle. And then finally, we want to have a look at the alternative or creative paths we might have. So are there other ways to get there? Is there a holding place we can go before we make the next big move? So that's what we're going to get through, what we're going to be doing through the growth process. And so we get to this question of strategy, and the question of what is strategy, and there's lots of definitions out there, but I like Michael Porter's definition. It's the simplest and most effective for me. And that is, strategy is about making choices. It's about making trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different. And the flip side to this, which is also really important, is also about choosing what you're not going to be. So a lot of what we're dealing with in strategy is figuring out not only what are we and where are we going to, what are we going to do, but what are we not going to do. So with limited set of resources, limited time, limited energy, a business really needs to make those decisions to have an effective strategy and be able to execute on that strategy well. And so the next question is, well, what's a strategic plan? Well, a strategic plan is an evolving written plan that sets forth the vision, mission, and values of the company, the long and short-term range goals, and the KPIs, so your team moves together as one. And notice that the focus here is on team. Strategic planning is all getting your team into alignment and moving together as a unit. And even if you're a solopreneur wearing many hats, that's sometimes just helpful for yourself, planning through and understanding the different facets or different elements of the business that have to move forward together. One thing I just want to emphasize here is this whole idea of rhythm. As Eisenhower and Churchill and others have similarly said, plans are worthless, but planning is indispensable. So in an emergency or in a time of uncertainty, often the first thing that happens is all the plans taken off the top shelf and just thrown out the window. But if you haven't been planning, you can do that work much more intelligently. It's really the process that's important in strategy, not the end result. So it's the discussions of how we get there that's most important. And you have to have a couple of rhythms that we try to bring in. We focus on annual strategic planning, where we focus on a core framework, looking at a core framework, which is a big picture, purpose and vision, 3-year targets and annual goals. Then on a quarterly basis, we're looking at, so what do we need to do? What have we learned that we need to update on the strategic plan? And are we going to improve our focus on our quarterly actions and priorities? And then on a monthly basis to review progress, correct course correct, and if required, and identify any obstacles that need to be overcome. And they are really the core leadership team planning meetings and the rhythms that you have to be put in place annually, quarterly, and monthly. So if you're looking at how you're setting up next year, I'd take your calendar and really think about how am I going to set up these things up so that I can make a consistent and repeating rhythm. So in his book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, Fern Harnish describes his formula for winning this way. He says, winning teams have the right people doing the right things. And so how do we get the right people doing the right things right? Well, to become and remain competitive, a business really needs three things: a framework that identifies and supports your business strategy, really a common language which expresses that strategy, and a really well-developed habit of using that framework and language continually to elevate your strategic progress. And we use a strategic framework called the planning or accountability pyramid as a strategic framework that works best for emerging companies. So if we start at the bottom of the pyramid, every company is built on core values. They may be defined or not. They may be articulated or not, but every business has a set of core values. Businesses that really last the test of time do so because they have a set of core values that are bigger than the lifetime of even the person who founded the business. So if you take any of the great businesses you study them, you'll find that they have a core set of values that were there from the beginning. Next on the pyramid is the purpose of the business. The purpose of the business generally lasts the lifetime of the management or who actually owns the business. And if you've ever observed a business before and after it's been sold, often that purpose can change. And that's true for both small and medium businesses and even huge conglomerates. Now, if the business is successful and has any real value, it's probably going to keep its core values and the legacy of the founder living on its way, but the purpose can often change. So the core value should and behave, and the purposes is why you're doing this business. And once you get past all that, you're looking at what we call the targets. That describes where you want your business to be in the next 3 to 5 years. More generally, that's 3 years this time, because the space of business these days, 3 years is as far as we kind of look out in terms of targets. On an annual basis, you want to focus on goals. This is where you ask, well, what do we need to achieve this year so that we can reach our targets a few years out? And then once you've done that, you can say, right, all right, what actions are we going to take to undertake this quarter? And in other words, how are we going to get there? And then on a weekly basis, we're just asking ourselves, okay, when are we going to do these things? What's our schedule? What are we going to accomplish this week? And then on a daily basis, it's about, well, who's accountable for getting those things done? And when it's implemented, it makes the whole thing work. And without this in place, especially as a business grows, things tend to spin out of control pretty quickly. Without it, time, effort, and energy are really squandered, and it becomes less and less possible for the business to achieve great things. But what it does require is it really requires excellent leadership. So, and for that reason, leadership in a growing company, what we kind of talk about is 99% alignment and 1% vision. Now, most new companies have no problem creating new vision. Creating vision is what they do to attract great people. And if you want to get them and lots of them, that's what you do, to keep talking about vision, and the big vision in front of people. But whilst that vision piece is really important, the other side of the slide is once you get growing and building a team, alignment becomes really critical, just as critical, but it takes up more time. Without having people in alignment, you're never going to able to do things better, faster, cheaper. If you don't bring your people into alignment with that accountability pyramid, you won't achieve your vision. And while the accountability pyramid, conveys to everyone in your business, okay, the various pieces, your values, your purpose, your targets, your goals, your actions, the one-page strategic plan is really the tool for getting it all down on paper. You see, as your business grows, and the faster it grows, the harder it is to get everyone on the same page. And the problem, of course, is there isn't a single page to get people aligned. So, often there's dozens of pages, images, and meeting minutes and emails, all purporting to describe your company's vision, your mission, and your strategy. But this tool, the one-page strategic plan, is really the instrument that you can really use to produce alignment across your business, to get the right people doing the right things right. So I just really want to show you the power of this thing by just looking at quickly section by section. At the very top, you'll see what we call a SWOT analysis, which is where we always tend to start. And that's the first thing you do in the strategic planning process, take a step back from the business and really survey the landscape, both externally and internally. What are the strengths of your business? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities to exceed your plan? And what are the threats that you have to making your plan? And another thing we'd like to put in here is also, are there any trends that it might not fit neatly into the rest of this? And should you be tracking them? What's happening in technology out there? All of those sorts of things. What's is the typical macroeconomic things, but what are some of the trends in your industry that you should be tracking? So that's the first thing you do in developing your plan. The next thing you do is really on the left-hand side of this one-page strategic plan. This is where you're really looking at your core values and beliefs. In the first two columns, you have your core values, belief, and your purpose statement. And so when you're developing your plan, you're really stepping back and starting with a 30,000-foot view, the core values and purpose statement. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail of that, but there are exercises available to really identify the business's core values and purpose if you haven't already. The next thing is really what we call the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. This is, you see at the bottom of the second column here, underneath the purpose and actions. So, for example, Nike at one point had a big, hairy, audacious goal of crushing Adidas. They worked at that for years and finally did it. So you just need to figure out what the BHAG and write it in this section. Then as you're going through the 10 to 30, the actions there, you're going to be below the purpose. You're going to be asking, okay, so over the next 10, 30 years, what are the main things we need to really do to hit our big, hairy, audacious goal? Those are the specific actions you need to take on that. And then as you look at these next three columns, so let me just clarify something. The blank tables under these targets, goals, and actions usually correspond to your financial targets for 3 years, 1 year, and the next quarter. And again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but you're actually talking about here is setting your financial targets. And that's really a piece of work that sits alongside your strategic plan and your revenue and profit budget. You can literally transfer the information from your revenue and profit budget and things in this section of the plan. And then you're looking at your third column, and it says sandbox market. And if you've already done some thinking about your market, your customer demographics, your psychographics, and all that stuff, you'll be able to fill in that sandbox. What are your product and service lines? What are the distribution channels and those sorts of things that you're using in terms of your sandbox, in terms of your market. And if you don't have a good handle on those, that's where you need to do some really work around your unique selling proposition and your tactical marketing plan. So you'll see that there are also a couple of sections for your brand promise and elevator pitch. And just like the revenue and profit budget you're going to be doing alongside this, that need to be completed. You also need to work on your USP and guarantee if you haven't done so, your unique differentiators. Now, below that sandbox is what we call these thrusts and capabilities. And a lot of times businesses will decide that they want to develop a new capability to hit their big, hairy, audacious goals. So in the 3-year period, we've got capabilities we're trying to develop, significant strategic thrusts that we need to undertake, the capabilities that we need to build into the business. And over the next 3 years, what opportunities do we have, taking opportunity of the market based on what capabilities we have, and do these support our actions for the purpose column. And if you look at this and the column called goals, you can see the section for key initiatives. And what you're really doing here is considering your 1-year goals, and thinking specifically about your initiatives to meet your 1-year goals. And then finally, you've got these, what we call rocks and accountability. These are the 3 to 5 biggest priorities that need to be achieved over the next quarter. What are your main priorities? The bottom line is that you need to work on those biggest priorities, your rocks first. Everything else will kind of fall into place. But many businesses start out the year with a huge number of priorities and get very little done by the end of the year. But by coming up with your rocks every quarter, every 90 days, you can really start to build momentum. And then you'll see there are a couple of boxes there. You put your key performance indicators as well as sections for your brand promise and elevator pitch. And And just like your revenue and profit budget and your USB and guarantee, those sorts of things, if you don't know what your KPIs are, you need to make that one of your top big rocks or priorities for one of your quarters, or probably your first quarter, so you're really clear about what the key performance indicators for your business are. And then there's some boxes right there to start thinking about the theme for one of the year. These are really a kind of to kind of group the theme. Okay, to get the team focused on what is the theme for this quarter, what is the theme for the year in terms of the actions, the priorities. So you probably also just noticed that these elements that are color coded, the orange, yellow, green, blue, and pink, really that's because the most effective way to develop a one-page strategic plan is really to make sure everything you say you're going to do for the next 10 to 30 years in that second column is supported by something you're doing in the 3 years, something you're doing in the next year as an annual initiative, so that they kind of join up, so that whatever your work at your quarterly priorities or rocks are focused on delivering part of the annual initiative. The annual initiatives are designed to deliver the 3 year goals, that type of thing. You can kind of get the drift. So the other key piece that I'd like to focus on is making sure that we're stretching. So everyone has a comfort zone, the things that they do them well, and they're comfortable with. And our panic zone is, where we have no clue what to do. And if you tell me something there that I'm kind of frozen because I don't know what my next step is going to be. What we want to find is this learning zone. It's outside our comfort zone, but it's not our panic zone, where when we set our objectives, our key results, we should be pushing ourselves a little. And the indicator I like to use is about 80% confident in the goals that we're going. So if a team tells me, when we look at their quarterly plan and I look at their key objectives and I ask them, well, how confident are you in achieving these? And if they say something like, yeah, no problem, well, I'm thinking, well, we're not probably stretching ourselves enough. And so we want to have a little bit of, this is a little bit scary, but not, panic. And then if they said something less than 70%, well, it's kind of frustrating. I think we're probably not spending enough time on strategy. And similarly, when we're looking at our quarterly results, we want to be hitting 8 out of 10 of our goals that we're set. We know we're kind of stretching ourselves enough, and we're not being too much in our comfort zone. So just to have a few recommendations. So I've talked about strategy, what it is. I just now want to talk you through actually how to build your strategy, what to actually do. And I've talked about a process a lot. So a lot of what I do is coach and help people figure out how they want to do and develop their strategy. Because the process is just important, it's more in process than the output in the end. But because you need buy-in, you need commitment, you need enrollment from your team, to make sure that's going to be able to be executed well. Most of this falls down in the execution. So you want to set up the way you develop your strategy to make sure it's executed well. So the first thing I would say is bring together the right people, make sure that the right people are involved. You may have some people who are part of the input team providing information and analysis, and they might not be the right people to be part of the strategy development team. Who do we involve in the process of getting input into the strategic process? Who do we collect information from? And then who do we bring into then the team that's going to develop the strategy out of that information? And I like to really, think through that. Who do I have in each camp and why? And then we want to make sure we have common values, priority, and scope. So we want to be clear on what the priorities are, the scope of the effort's going to be. And then I want to make sure I have a diversity of experience and points of view. That's always a challenge, because I think sometimes people end up setting their team around people they like. I want to be with the people who think like me. In fact, you don't. You want to have a certain amount of diversity of opinion, experience, background, skill sets, so that you have new ideas and perspectives. You need enough commonality around the important things, the values, but you have to have a team function together that is diverse in its thinking. So it's too easy to come up with groupthink and where everyone just has the same experience, and you all just start thinking together and really not pushing yourselves and challenge yourself and challenging your thinking. Second thing, make sure you create the right environment. So I find getting out of the day-to-day space, I want to get out of my normal routines. I want to get away from my normal distractions. I want to get into new space. I want to get out of my normal environment and do that strategic work. And, what I want to do is avoid a conference table, a meeting table. Tend to put teams up in rooms that do not have tables. We try and get into an open space and start putting everything up onto a wall, like have people sitting around in semicircles. You want to change up the environment. And the other thing is to inject new ideas, experiences, energy. I've kind of worked with teams. We'll have a section of the day we'll go for a walk, and so we'll go through a question that would, or an issue that we want to think about and talk about that on the walk. We have discussion while we're walking or while we're eating or doing activity. So it's just not sitting around the same old room trying to think the same old thing. So, and if you're going to visit a location, going to visit a shop, or going to visit the factory floor, whether your business is, you can see how new information on and taking it in on the table might affect how you think differently on strategy. So that's number 2, create the right environment. Number 3, the third thing is really reflecting on last year. Focus on this whole idea of retrospective view of the past. One of our best sources for insight what are we doing, might want to do things differently in the future. And there's really a couple of processes. First, you want to start with collecting data. What are the highs? What are the lows? How did we do against our objectives and key results? What did we complete? What didn't we? Why not? Collecting that data is always the first step. And then once you have that data, develop some insights. What are the observations? What are the inferences? What patterns do you see? What did you notice? What surprises? What's missing? What questions do you have? They're all insights from that data. And then that third step is really start thinking about ideas. At this point, you're still divergent. We're still talking about possible actions, possible ideas, changes for the future, but things that I might want to do in the future based on the observations in the past. And then fourth is really using that SWOT and trends analysis. The top of that page we talked about to define the landscape, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats and trends. And you particularly want to see strengths and weaknesses. What are the trends that are emerging? How do they play and what's going on in the market? Strengths, generally internally competitive capabilities. What do we have that allow us to compete? Weaknesses are what your internal liabilities or shortcomings. Do we have that other people could use to hurt us or that could use to our disadvantage? What are our vulnerabilities? And then trends and micro and macro trends that might impact the future. They might be as simple as what's going on in our market, in our geography, in our politics or economics, world trends. It could be technology trends. We want to understand what trends are out there and going to impact our ability to be successful in the future. And then fifth, is, really figure out what are your 3-year targets. Once you've figured out your long-term view, your vision, your purpose, what's our 3-year plan? Where do we want to be in 3 years? And then once you've set these, you're going to start to say, okay, so given where we need to be in 3 years, what are the critical KPIs and measure how we're going to be on track? And based on those 3-year targets, what do we need to be focused on next year? What are our annual goals? And then what you do is figure out, well, what are the key moves quarter by quarter? If we're going to, those are our annual goals, figure out quarter by quarter, what are the objectives that we need to put in place? I like to think about these in terms of key decisions about people, about strategy, about execution, about cash. What do I need to do in each quarter? I want to look at the targets and their dependencies and need to figure out the top 3 to 5 priorities or objectives that I need to focus on that quarter to hit my numbers. And that's all about the choices I'm making, the things that I'm choosing to do, the things that I'm choosing to focus on and implement the strategy. Because if you don't have those priorities clarified, it means that I'm only really going to be working on all the urgent things all the time. I'm never going to be getting to the really important stuff. And then finally, determine your first quarter objectives. So this is what we've done in that long. We've done the long-term planning, the 3-year targets, the annual plan. Now I'm going to say, okay, I've got those quarter by quarter objectives. What are the 3-5 key things that I need to deliver in that first quarter? And again, think about people, process, and finance. In order to deliver on this objective, what are the key results that I have to have from people, process, and finance point of view? And then think through, how's this going to impact the various parts of the business so that these things sync up and work together? So that kind of lays the process for how I move the highest level thinking down to that strategy implementation level. And that's where it gets us to how do we execute on the 90-day plan process, which for me is on the execution side rather than the strategy side. And that's a whole other topic. But that's how we develop our annual strategic plan. I know we're just coming up to a time. So probably you're in one of two places at the moment. You've got a really healthy, profitable business. You have a clear plan for next year and beyond. You're looking to good. That's brilliant. Probably might have got one or two tips out of the thing. Fantastic. Really excited for you. If you don't have a clear plan for the future and getting some help with developing your strategic plan sounds like something that to explore, I invite you just to book a 15-minute initial call with me at timewithshane.com. And then if it seems like we've got a good fit, might be able to help, we can book a longer 90-minute complimentary coaching session to discuss your assessment, pinpoint your exact challenges, and create a specific custom tailored plan. So that's on that side. So, and by the way, you can fully understand that my work's guaranteed. I have a guarantee process. You can look at that on my website. And then, so there you go. I encourage you to go to timewithshane.com, book a complimentary initial confidential 15-minute initial call. And if we agree there's a fit, we'll get you booked in for a complimentary coaching session and dive deeper into the challenges and see if we can get you on your way to going forward.